Nexus Station floated in the darkness of space like a massive silver wheel. It was the largest structure ever built by the Galactic Council, home to diplomats, traders, and representatives from over 300 alien species. Ships came and went at all hours, carrying goods and passengers from every corner of the known galaxy. The station had existed for 10,000 years, and in all that time, it had never seen war. It was neutral ground, sacred ground, a place where even the oldest enemies could meet in peace. Ambassador. Daniel Morgan stood near the viewing window of his quarters, watching the endless stream of vessels drift past. He was a tall man with tired eyes and graying hair at his temples. At 45 years old, he had spent most of his career trying to earn humanity a seat at the galactic table. It was difficult work. Humans were newcomers to the stars, having discovered faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Most of the Council species had been traveling between worlds for millennia. They looked at humanity the way adults might look at a child learning to walk. But Daniel had hope. This cultural exchange mission was an opportunity to show the galaxy that humans were worthy of respect. He had brought his daughter with him, believing it would demonstrate humanity's peaceful intentions. Nothing said we come in friendship quite like a father traveling with his child. Lily Morgan was 8 years old. She had her mother's bright green eyes and her father's curiosity about everything. Since arriving on the station 3 days ago, she had asked approximately 10,000 questions. Why did the Korvathi have 4 arms? How did the Malini breathe underwater? Could she try the purple fruit the Vestani were selling in the market? Daniel answered as many questions as he could, and when he could not, Lily simply found someone else to ask. On the 4th day, the Council held a grand ceremony to welcome several new member species. Daniel was required to attend, and he brought Lily along. She wore her nicest dress and promised to be on her best behavior. The ceremony took place in the Grand Hall, a massive chamber at the heart of the station. Thousands of beings filled the space, representing every shape and size imaginable. Some floated in anti-gravity fields. Others stood on multiple legs or coiled in spirals. The air was filled with translation devices humming in hundreds of languages. Lily stayed close to her father at first, holding his hand and watching the strange proceedings with wide eyes. But as the hours passed and the speeches grew longer, she became restless. Daniel was deep in conversation with a Korvathi trade minister when Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, I need to use the bathroom," she whispered. Daniel pointed toward a corridor at the edge of the hall. "Down that way, sweetheart. The human facilities are marked. Come right back." Lily nodded and hurried off through the crowd. She found the corridor easily enough, but the signs were confusing. There were symbols she did not recognize, colors that seemed to shift and change. She walked further, looking for anything familiar. The corridor split into 3 paths. Lily chose the middle one because it had a soft blue light that reminded her of home. She walked for several minutes, her small footsteps echoing in the silence. The hallway grew narrower, older. The walls were made of dark stone instead of metal, covered in carvings she did not understand. At the end of the corridor, she found a circular chamber. It was beautiful. Crystal formations grew from the floor and ceiling, glowing with inner light. In the center stood a pedestal holding a small golden sphere. Lily stepped inside, drawn by curiosity. She reached out and touched one of the crystals. It was warm under her fingers, almost alive. Alarms began to scream. Lily jumped back, terrified. Lights flashed red and white. Voices shouted in languages she could not understand. Before she could run, tall figures in flowing black robes surrounded her. They had pale gray skin, elongated skulls, and eyes like pools of liquid silver. These were the Vethkai, one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. And Lily had just walked into their most sacred temple. They seized her arms and dragged her away despite her screams and tears. She cried for her father, but no one answered. Daniel Morgan was still in the Grand Hall when the Vethkai guards arrived. They pushed through the crowd without apology, their faces cold and expressionless. Behind them, 2 more guards carried Lily between them like a criminal. "Daddy!" She screamed. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He ran toward her, but more guards blocked his path. "What is this?" he demanded. "Let go of my daughter." The crowd parted as a new figure approached. He was Vethkai, but taller than the others, dressed in robes of pure white with golden symbols embroidered along the edges. His name was Kolveth, High Arbiter of the Vethkai people and senior member of the Galactic Council. His face held no emotion as he looked at the crying human child. "This creature has violated the Temple of Eternal Light," Kolveth announced, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "She has touched the sacred crystals. She has defiled 10,000 years of tradition. Under the ancient laws of the Vethkai, the punishment is death." Daniel felt the world collapse around him. She is a child. She did not know. She was looking for the bathroom and got lost. "Ignorance is not a defense," Kolveth replied calmly. "The law is the law. It applies to all beings, regardless of age or species. The council has already voted. The sentence will be carried out. You cannot do this." Daniel threw himself at the guards, but they held him back easily. "She is 8 years old. Please, I beg you, show mercy." Other human diplomats rushed forward to help, but Council's security forces blocked them. Several alien representatives looked uncomfortable, but none spoke against the Vethkai. The elder races held too much power. No one dared challenge them. Kolveth raised his hand. A guard stepped forward with a device that looked like a simple metal rod. "No," Daniel screamed. He fought with everything he had, but he could not break free. "Lily, Lily, I am here. Daddy is here." Lily looked at her father with tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, I am scared. I want to go home." "I know, sweetheart. I know. Everything will be okay. Daddy will fix this. I promise." But he could not fix it. He could not stop what happened next. The guard touched the rod to Lily's chest. There was a flash of light, and then she was gone. Her small body crumpled to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. The green light faded from her eyes. Daniel Morgan stopped fighting. He stopped breathing. He simply stared at the place where his daughter had been alive just moments before. The hall was silent. Somewhere, a translation device hummed. A ship passed by the viewing window outside. Kolveth lowered his hand. "The matter is concluded. The law has been satisfied." He turned and walked away, his robes trailing behind him like shadows. Daniel fell to his knees beside his daughter's body. He gathered her into his arms, feeling the warmth already leaving her skin. He did not scream. He did not cry. He simply held her, rocking slowly back and forth. But inside his mind, something had changed. Something had broken and reformed into something harder than steel. He would make them pay. He would make them all pay. That night, from his quarters on Nexus Station, Daniel Morgan sent a single encrypted transmission to Earth. It contained coordinates, video footage, and 3 words. They killed her. 8 on Earth. Something ancient began to wake Admiral Grace Patterson, was 62 years old and had served in the United Earth Defense Initiative for 4 decades. She had seen conflicts on 3 continents, commanded peacekeeping missions on 2 colony worlds, and earned every medal the military could offer. But nothing in her long career had prepared her for the message that arrived at midnight on a cold Tuesday in November. She was in her office at the Pentagon when her secure terminal began to flash. The encryption level was the highest possible, reserved for communications that could end civilizations. Grace entered her codes and waited. The face of Ambassador Daniel Morgan appeared on the screen. He looked like a dead man. His eyes were empty, his voice flat and hollow. Behind him, Grace could see the sterile walls of a station quarters. "Admiral Patterson," he said, "I am sending you something. Watch it. Then show it to everyone who needs to see it." The video file began to play. Grace watched a little girl wander into a chamber of glowing crystals. She watched alien guards drag the child away. She watched a tall figure in white robes pronounce a death sentence, while the girl's father screamed and begged. She watched an 8-year-old child die for the crime of getting lost. When the video ended, Grace sat in silence for a long time. Her hands were shaking. She had grandchildren the same age as that little girl. "They think we are weak," Daniel's voice continued. They think we are primitive. They think we will accept this because we have no choice. Show them how wrong they are." The transmission ended. Grace picked up her phone and made a series of calls. Within 2 hours, the President of the United States had seen the footage. Within 4 hours, every world leader had seen it. Within 6 hours, an emergency session of the United Nations was convened. President Samuel Hayes stood before the assembled representatives, his face grim. He was a former soldier himself, decorated in the last great war before humanity reached the stars. He understood what he was about to set in motion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "you have all seen the recording. You have all witnessed what the Galactic Council did to one of our children. They murdered her for Tucci. Engia Crystal. They called it justice. They called it law." Paused, letting the words sink in. "We call it war." The vote was unanimous. Every nation on Earth agreed. Humanity would respond. But the galaxy did not know what humanity had been hiding 300 years ago. When humans first discovered they were not alone in the universe, the governments of Earth made a decision. They would present themselves to the galaxy as peaceful explorers, eager to learn and cooperate. They would hide their true strength, keeping it in reserve for the day when peace was no longer an option, deep beneath the ice of Antarctica. In caverns carved by machines that no longer existed, they built the Sleeper Fleet. Admiral Patterson took a military transport to the southern continent. She traveled with a small team of officers who had been cleared for the highest levels of secrecy. Most of them did not know where they were going or why. They only knew that the Admiral had that look in her eyes, the one that said history was about to change. The entrance to the shipyards was hidden inside a research station that officially studied climate patterns. Grace led her team through a series of security checkpoints, each one requiring more codes and biometric scans than the last. Finally, they reached an elevator that descended into the Earth for nearly 20 minutes. When the doors opened, Captain Marcus Webb gasped out loud. They stood on a platform overlooking a cavern so vast that clouds formed near its ceiling. The space stretched for miles in every direction, carved from solid rock and reinforced with materials that gleamed like polished silver. And filling every inch of that impossible space were ships, thousands of ships, frigates, and destroyers lined up in perfect rows. Cruisers and battleships rested in massive cradles, their hulls dark and silent. And towering above them all, like mountains made of metal, were the dreadnoughts. These were vessels designed to crack planets open, to end wars with a single volley. They had waited here in the darkness for 3 centuries, patient and hungry. "My God," Marcus whispered. "How is this possible? How did we build all of this without anyone knowing?" "Every generation added to it," Grace replied. "Every government, every leader, they all understood. Someday humanity would need to fight for survival. Someday we would need these ships. And when that day came, we would be ready." She walked toward the largest vessel in the fleet, a dreadnought that made the others look like toys. Its name was painted on the hull in letters 50 feet tall. The conviction. "Wake them up," Grace ordered. "Wake them all up." Engineers and technicians flooded into the caverns. Power cores that had been dormant for centuries hummed back to life. Navigation systems booted up, running diagnostics on equipment that had never been used. Weapon batteries tested their targeting arrays, finding no errors. The Conviction's bridge was enormous, designed to coordinate the movements of an entire fleet. Grace took her place in the command chair and felt the ship recognize her. Accepting her authority through a neural link embedded in the armrest, "Admiral," a young officer reported, "all systems are operational. The fleet is ready to launch." "How many ships do we have?" 12,416 vessels, ma'am. Everything from scout ships to planet crackers. Full ammunition loadouts, full fuel reserves, full crew complement standing by." Grace allowed herself a small smile. For 300 years, humanity had pretended to be weak. They had accepted insults and dismissals from alien races who saw them as primitive newcomers. They had smiled and nodded and hidden their true capabilities. Those days were over. The shipyard doors opened, revealing the frozen Antarctic sky. One by one, the ships of the sleeper fleet rose from their long slumber. They punched through the atmosphere in formations. So precise, they looked like works of art. They filled the sky above every continent. Visible to everyone on Earth, people looked up from their homes and offices and cars. They watched the impossible armada gather overhead, blocking out the sun with its shadows. Some were afraid. Most were not. Most understood what this meant. Humanity was going to war. On Nexus Station, Kolveth received reports of the fleet with mild curiosity. His advisors showed him sensor data that indicated thousands of human vessels moving toward Council space. "This is concerning," one advisor said nervously. "Perhaps we should prepare a defensive response." Kolveth dismissed the suggestion with a wave of his long fingers. The humans are a minor species. They have been traveling between stars for barely 2 centuries. Their technology is primitive. Their numbers are insignificant. He returned to his meditation. They pose no threat to the Council. This tantrum will exhaust itself soon enough. His advisors exchanged worried glances but said nothing. The High Arbiter had spoken. The matter was closed. Across the galaxy, other species watched the human fleet with growing unease. They had sensors sophisticated enough to analyze the approaching vessels. They could see the weapon signatures, the shield strengths, the engine outputs. What they saw did not match what they knew about humanity. These were not primitive ships built by a young species. These were engines of destruction designed by people who understood war on a fundamental level. These were weapons created by a civilization that had spent centuries preparing for exactly this moment. And they were coming. The sleeper fleet moved through space like a river of steel and fire. 12,000 ships traveled in perfect formation, their engines leaving trails of blue light that stretched for millions of miles. At the center of the armada, protected by rings of warships, the Conviction led the way toward Council space. Admiral Grace Patterson stood on the bridge. Watching the stars slide past on the main viewing screen, she had not slept in 3 days. None of them had. There was too much to do, too much at stake. There's too much anger burning in their hearts. Captain Marcus's Webb approached with a datapad in his hand. He was a solid man in his early 40s, with dark skin and steady eyes. He had commanded destroyers for 15 years before being assigned to the flagship. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for commanding the vanguard of humanity's first galactic war. "Admiral, we are approaching the Kareth Nebula," he reported. "Long-range sensors are picking up a Council blockade. Approximately 200 ships, mixed fleet composition. Vethkai, Corvathi, Malini, and several other species." Grace nodded slowly. "Have they attempted communication?" "Yes, ma'am. They are demanding that we halt our advance and return to Earth immediately. They say that any further movement toward Council space will be considered an act of war." "An act of war," Grace repeated. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. "They murdered a child, and they call us the aggressors." She turned to the tactical display, studying the enemy formation. The Council ships were arranged in a standard defensive pattern designed to block a fleet of inferior vessels. It was a textbook deployment, the kind taught in military academies across the galaxy. It assumed the enemy would follow predictable tactics and accept predictable losses. They had no idea what they were facing. "Captain Webb, take the vanguard forward. Give them one chance to stand down. If they refuse, you have permission to engage." Marcus saluted and hurried to his station. Moments later, 60 destroyers broke from the main formation and accelerated toward the enemy line. These were the fastest ships in the fleet, designed for quick strikes and rapid maneuvers. Their crews were volunteers. Men and women who understood that they might not survive the first battle. The Council commander responded to Marcus's hail with visible confusion. On the view screen, his image flickered and wavered. He was Corvathi, a reptilian species with 4 arms and scales that shifted color with emotion. Right now, those scales were a nervous yellow. "Human vessel, you are in violation of Council territory. You must withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Marcus kept his voice calm and steady. "Council Commander, I am Captain Marcus Webb of the United Earth Defense Initiative. We are here in response to the unlawful execution of a human child by the Vethkai High Arbiter. We demand the surrender of those responsible for this crime. Stand down your vessels and allow us to pass, and no one needs to die today." The Korvathi commander's scales flickered to an angry red. "You dare make demands of the council? You are nothing but primitive apes playing with toys you do not understand." The Vethkai acted within their rights. "The matter is closed." "The matter," Marcus replied quietly, "is just beginning." He cut the communication and turned to his weapons officer. "All ships target their command vessel. Fire on my mark." The council fleet opened fire first. Hundreds of energy beams lanced through space, converging on the human destroyers. Shield systems flared to life, absorbing the impacts without visible strain. The council ships fired again and again, but the human shields held steady. Then the sleeper fleet returned fire. The weapons humanity had developed in secret were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Particle beams that cut through shields like paper, kinetic rounds that accelerated to near-light speed, missiles that phased through solid matter and exploded inside enemy vessels. The Council command ship vanished in a ball of white fire. It did not explode so much as cease to exist, vaporized by a weapon that should not have been possible. Other ships followed, torn apart by forces they could not comprehend. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 200 Council vessels had been reduced to debris and vapor. The human fleet lost 3 destroyers to concentrated fire from a Vethkai battleship that managed to flank them before being destroyed. Admiral Patterson watched the aftermath on the strategic display. Scattered escape pods tumbled through the wreckage, carrying survivors who would spread word of what had happened here. That was intentional. She wanted the galaxy to know. "All ships resume course for Nexus Station," she ordered. "Full speed ahead?" Behind her, Ambassador Daniel Morgan stood in the observer's gallery. He had been given a position on the flagship at his own request, refusing to remain on Earth while others fought for his daughter's memory. He watched the debris field shrink on the view screen, his face empty of expression. Grace climbed the stairs to join him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "This will not bring her back," Grace said finally. Daniel nodded. "I know. Is this what you want? All this death, all this destruction?" He turned to look at her, and for the first time since his daughter's murder, something flickered in his eyes. Not satisfaction, not joy, but something harder and colder. "What I want is impossible," he said. "I want to hold my daughter again. I want to hear her laugh. I want to watch her grow up and fall in love and have children of her own. The Vethkai took all of that from me in a single moment, and nothing I do will ever change that." He looked back at the view screen, where the fleet continued its march toward Council space. "But I can make sure it never happens again. I can make sure no other father has to watch his child die for a crime she did not understand. I can make the galaxy understand that humanity will not be ignored, will not be dismissed, will not accept injustice because we are young and weak." Grace studied his face, seeing the grief and rage that burned beneath his calm exterior. She understood it. She shared it. Every human in the fleet shared it. "The Council will not surrender easily," she said. "They have held power for 10,000 years. They will fight to keep it. Then we will fight harder." The fleet pressed on. More Council ships attempted to slow their advance, but none could match humanity's firepower. Word spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers now watched in fear as the Armada approached. Some began to reconsider their alliances. The Council had held power through tradition and intimidation, not through love or respect. Many species had grievances against the elder races, old wounds that had never healed. Now, watching the human fleet tear through Council defenses like a knife through cloth, they began to wonder if change was finally possible. On Nexus Station, Kolvith received report after report of the approaching disaster. His scales, which had always been a serene white, began to show traces of gray and black. Fear, his species' color of fear. How is this possible? He demanded of his advisors. How did the humans develop such weapons? How did they build such a fleet without our knowledge? No one had answers. The Vethkai had monitored human space for centuries, confident that they understood everything about the young species. They had seen the small defense forces, the primitive starships, the struggling colonies. They had never suspected that it was all an act. We must rally the full might of the Council, an advisor suggested. Call every fleet, every ally, every ship that can fight. We must stop them before they reach the station. Kolveth nodded slowly. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never expected to feel. He felt doubt. Nexus Station appeared on the view screen like a silver wheel against the blackness of space. The massive structure had witnessed 10,000 years of history, countless treaties and betrayals, the rise and fall of empires. Now it witnessed something new, a human fleet that stretched from horizon to horizon. Weapons charged and ready, Admiral Grace Patterson studied the tactical display with narrowed eyes. The Council had gathered every ship they could muster. 30,000 vessels formed a defensive sphere around the station, representing dozens of species and military traditions. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. It was not enough. "The Council is hailing us," a communications officer reported. "Put them through." The view screen flickered and a new image appeared. It was not Kolveth, but a Malini ambassador named Selvash, an aquatic being who floated in a tank of pressurized water. His tentacles moved nervously as he spoke. "Admiral Patterson, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I urge you to reconsider this action. The death of the human child was a tragedy, but it was carried out according to ancient law. Surely there is a diplomatic solution to this crisis." Grace allowed herself a cold smile. "Where was your diplomacy when Ambassador Morgan begged for his daughter's life? Where was your intervention when the Vethkai murdered an 8-year-old girl for getting lost?" Selvash tentacles curled in discomfort. The Vethkai acted independently. Many of us opposed the sentence, but we were overruled. "Please, Admiral, do not punish the entire galaxy for the actions of one species." "I am not here to punish the galaxy," Grace replied. "I am here to collect the ones responsible. Surrender High Arbiter Kolveth and every council member who voted for the execution. Do this, and no more blood needs to be spilled." There was a long pause. Selvash's image wavered as he consulted with others off-screen. When he returned, his voice was heavy with resignation. "The Vethkai refused to surrender their arbiter, and there are those on the council who still believe you can be stopped. Then they are about to learn otherwise." The transmission ended. Grace turned to her tactical officer. "All ships, begin the assault." The Battle of Nexus Station began with a roar of fire that lit up the void like a second sun. Human vessels punched through the defensive lines, their weapons tearing through enemy shields with brutal efficiency. Council ships fought back with desperate courage. But they were outmatched at every turn. The space around the station became a nightmare of explosions and debris. Ships from a dozen species broke apart under the human assault. Escape pods tumbled through the chaos, carrying survivors who would never forget what they saw. The Council's defensive sphere collapsed inward, shrinking like a dying star. But not everyone fought against humanity, eh? Group of Korvathi cruisers broke away from the main fleet and turned their weapons on their former allies. They were followed by a squadron of Vistani fighters, then a battle group from the Thalani species. Years of resentment against the elder races boiled over into open rebellion. "Admiral, we are receiving surrender signals from multiple Council species," the communications officer reported. "They are asking to join us." Grace nodded grimly. "Accept their surrenders, tell them to stand down and withdraw from the battle zone. We have no quarrel with those who choose justice over tradition." The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. By the time the last Council ship stopped firing, over 15,000 vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had lost 400 ships, mostly to the fierce resistance of the Vethkai, who fought to the last with fanatic determination. Now came the harder task. Commander Nate Sullivan led the strike team that boarded Nexus Station. He was a quiet man with sharp eyes, and the kind of calm that came from facing death so many times that it had become boring. His team consisted of 40 soldiers, each one hand-picked for this mission. They entered through a maintenance hatch on the station's lower levels and fought their way upward. Vethkai guards challenged them at every corridor, every junction, every doorway. The aliens were skilled warriors, but human weapons cut them down without mercy. "Commander, we have located the target," a soldier reported. "The Arbiter is in the same chamber where the child was executed. It looks like he is making a last stand with his personal guard." Nate felt something twist in his stomach. The same chamber. Of course it would be the same chamber. "All units, converge on my position. We take him alive." Those are the Admiral's orders. The assault on the Temple of Eternal Light was short but brutal. Kolveth's personal guard were the finest warriors the Vethkai had to offer, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, they fell, till only the High Arbiter himself remained. Nate found Kolveth, standing before the crystal pedestal at the center of the chamber. The same crystals that Lily Morgan had touched before she died. The Arbiter's robes were stained with the blood of his guards, but his face remained eerily calm. "You have one," Kolveth said, his voice echoing in the sacred space. "But what you have done here is a violation of everything the Council stands for. You have destroyed the peace that has lasted for 10,000 years. Nate raised his weapon, keeping it trained on the Arbiter's chest. "A peace built on the corpses of children is not peace. It is tyranny. The law is the law. The child violated our most sacred traditions. The punishment was just she was 8 years old." Nate stepped forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "She did not know your laws. She did not understand your rituals. She was looking for a bathroom and got lost. And you killed her anyway." For the first time, something flickered in Kolveth's silver eyes. It might have been doubt. It might have been fear. It was hard to tell with alien expressions. If I had shown mercy, it would have undermined the authority of the Vethkai. Oh. Their species would have seen it as weakness. The stability of the Council depends on the absolute enforcement of law. Then the Council deserves to fall. Nate gestured to his team, and they moved forward to restrain the Arbiter. Kolveth did not resist. His ancient eyes watched the humans with something that might have been curiosity. "You do not kill me," he observed. "Your people have destroyed thousands of ships, killed millions of beings, torn the galaxy apart in their rage. Yet you take me alive. Why?" Nate secured the restraints around the Arbiter's wrists. "Because we are not you. We do not execute helpless prisoners, not even prisoners who deserve it. You will face justice. Real justice. Not the kind that murders children." He activated his communicator. "Admiral Patterson, we have the target. The Arbiter is in custody." On the bridge of the Conviction, Grace received the news with a nod of grim satisfaction. Around her, officers cheered and embraced, celebrating the end of the battle. But Grace did not celebrate. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Ambassador Daniel Morgan stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the image of Nexus Station on the view screen. Somewhere in that massive structure was the chamber where his daughter had died. Somewhere in there was the being who had ordered her execution. "It is done," Grace said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "No, not yet. Not until they understand." He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same cold determination that had carried him across the galaxy. Not until everyone understands. The trial of High Arbiter Kolveth was held in the Great Assembly, Hall of the United Nations in New York City. It was the largest broadcast in the history of galactic civilization. Beings from thousands of worlds watched as humanity put the leaders of the Galactic Council on trial for the murder of a child. The defendants sat in a row of specially designed holding cells, each one tailored to the biological needs of its occupant. Kolveth occupied the central cell, his white robes replaced by a simple gray garment. Beside him sat the 14 council members who had voted in favor of Lily Morgan's execution. Their faces showed a mixture of defiance, fear, and resignation. Ambassador Daniel Morgan was asked to deliver the opening statement. He walked to the podium slowly, carrying a small photograph in his hand. He placed it on the stand before him and looked out at the assembled delegates and cameras. "Her name was Lily Morgan," he began, his voice steady despite the pain that burned behind his eyes. "She was 8 years old. She liked to draw pictures of aliens because she thought they were fascinating. She asked too many questions about everything. She laughed at jokes that were not funny and cried when animals got hurt in movies. He paused, looking down at the photograph. It showed Lily smiling at the camera, holding a stuffed toy that looked like a creature from another world. She was curious about the universe. She wanted to meet new species, learn new languages, see new worlds. When I told her she could come with me to Nexus Station, she was so excited she could not sleep for a week. Daniel looked up at the defendants, his gaze settling on Kolveth. You killed her because she touched a crystal. You killed her because your laws demanded it, because your traditions required it, because showing mercy to a child would have been seen as weakness. His voice grew harder. Colder, I want you to know something, all of you. I am not here for revenge. Revenge would mean killing you, and that would make me no better than you. I am here for justice. I am here to make sure the galaxy understands that there are some things that cannot be tolerated, some acts that cannot be forgiven, some prices that must be paid. He stepped back from the podium. I am here for my daughter. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. Arguments were made by both sides. The defendants claimed they had acted within the framework of galactic law, that the sentence was harsh but legal, that humanity had overreacted by launching a war that killed millions. The human prosecutors responded with a simple question. What law justifies the execution of a child who did not understand she was breaking it? No one could provide a satisfactory answer. When the verdict came, it surprised many who expected humanity to demand blood. The defendants were found guilty of murder under human law and crimes against sentient beings under newly established galactic principles. But the sentence was not death. Instead, they were condemned to life imprisonment on a remote colony world, where they would spend their remaining years studying human culture, human history, and human law. They would learn about the species they had dismissed as primitive. They would come to understand what they had destroyed. Kolveth accepted the sentence in silence. His silver eyes betrayed nothing as he was led away. In the weeks that followed, humanity began to reshape the galaxy. Admiral Grace Patterson formally dissolved the Galactic Council, announcing that its 10,000-year reign had come to an end. In its place, she proposed a new governing body called the Galactic Assembly, where every species, regardless of age or power, would have an equal voice. The proposal met with resistance from some quarters. The elder races, accustomed to their privilege and authority, subjected to sharing power with species they considered inferior. But they had seen what humanity could do. They had watched their fleets burn in the void around Nexus Station. They knew that resistance would only bring more destruction. One by one, the species of the galaxy accepted the new order, the Sleeper. Fleet did not return to its hiding place beneath the Antarctic ice. Instead, the ships took up positions throughout human space, a permanent reminder of what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. They patrolled trade routes, protected colonies, and kept the peace in sectors that had known only chaos and exploitation. But they also carried a new mission, to protect the innocent, regardless of species. Any being who harmed a child, any government that murdered the helpless, any power that abused the weak, would face the same judgment that had fallen upon the Galactic Council. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy to rule it. They had conquered it to change it on the first anniversary of Lily Morgan's death. A memorial was dedicated on Nexus Station. The Temple of Eternal Light, once sacred only to the Vethkai, was transformed into a garden that welcomed all species. Flowers from 100 worlds grew there, tended by volunteers who came from every corner of the galaxy. Ambassador Daniel Morgan attended the dedication ceremony alone. He walked through the garden slowly, touching petals that gleamed with colors no human eye had evolved to see. In the center of the garden, where the crystal pedestal had once stood, a small fountain now bubbled peacefully. Beside the fountain was a statue of a little girl reaching up to touch a star. Daniel knelt before the statue and placed the same photograph he had carried to the trial. Lily smiled up at him from the image, frozen forever at 8 years old. I hope you would be proud of what we did, he whispered. I hope you would understand why we had to do it. I hope wherever you are, you know that your daddy never stopped loving you." He stood and looked around the garden. Beings of every shape and size moved through the space, paying their respects. Some of them had lost children of their own to the cruelty of the old order. Some of them simply wanted to honor a little girl whose death had changed everything. Admiral Grace Patterson found him there an hour later. She stood beside him in silence, watching the fountain. "The Galactic Assembly held its first session today," she said finally. "They passed a law unanimously. It is called the Lily Morgan Act. It prohibits the execution of any being who could not have reasonably understood the law they violated. It applies to children, to outsiders, to anyone whose ignorance was genuine and not willful." Ow. She would have liked that. She always wanted to help people. Grace placed a hand on his shoulder. She did help people, Daniel. More than she could ever have imagined. Because of her, the galaxy will never be the same. Because of her, children everywhere will be safer. They stood together as the garden lights dimmed toward evening. Stars appeared in the viewing windows above, the same stars that Lily had dreamed of visiting. "They will remember her," Grace said quietly. Daniel looked at the statue of his daughter at the fountain, at the flowers from 100 worlds growing in the soil of what had been a place of death. "Yes," he said, "they will remember." And across the galaxy, in every corner of known space, they did. The name Lily Morgan became a symbol of hope and change, a reminder that even the smallest and most innocent among us can reshape the stars. Monuments were built in her honor on dozens of worlds. Schools and hospitals and research centers bore her name, but most importantly, her memory lived on in the laws that protected those who could not protect themselves, in the assembly that gave voice to the voiceless, in the fleet that stood ready to defend the helpless. Humanity had been dismissed as primitive newcomers. They had been ignored and insulted and underestimated. But when it mattered most, when justice demanded action, they had shown the galaxy what they truly were. They were protectors. They were avengers. They were parents who would burn the stars themselves to save their children, and the galaxy would never forget.